The morning unfolded without ceremony, the pale light spreading thinly across the savanna as if hesitant to disturb what lay beneath it, and in that quiet interval between night's retreat and the day's full arrival, a small lion cub rested near a shallow dip in the grass, its body curved inward, ribs lifting and falling so faintly that from a distance it seemed almost still, a fragile shape pressed into earth that still held the coolness of darkness, while insects hovered and small birds shifted along distant acacia branches, unaware that something was unfolding in their midst, and far away beyond the gentle slope of land and brush, the soft, rasping calls of hyenas drifted like broken laughter, carried by the breeze in irregular bursts, reminders of a presence that moved patiently and without hurry, always listening, always waiting. The cub's fur was dusted with fine sand and burrs, its ears flattened not in alertness but in exhaustion, its head tilted at an unnatural angle as though it had lowered itself and simply never gathered the strength to rise again, and each breath arrived late, shallow, trembling through its small chest before slipping back into silence. When the rangers first noticed it, they did not rush because years of watching had taught them that sudden movement often caused more harm than help, and so they slowed their steps, scanning the ground, measuring distance, reading the invisible lines of tension between predator and prey, life and loss, while one of them murmured almost without realizing, "Easy now," more to steady himself than to comfort the animal. They knelt several meters away, boots pressed into dry grass, hands resting loosely at their sides, their eyes tracing the cub's thin legs, the faint twitch of a whisker, the slight tremor that passed through its flank like a ripple on still water. Around them, the land continued its ordinary rhythm. Grasshoppers clicked, distant wildebeest shifted in loose clusters, heat began to rise from the soil in wavering sheets, yet within that normality there was an undeniable stillness centered on the small body before them. The cub did not lift its head, did not attempt to flee, did not summon even the weak protest of a frightened animal. It remained folded inward, conserving whatever strength remained, responding only with a slow blink when one ranger carefully inched closer, lowering himself until his shadow no longer crossed its face. A second voice, barely louder than breath, slipped into the air, "You're safe," though no one could be certain the words were understood, and perhaps they were meant only as reassurance for the humans who spoke them. The distant calls grew louder, then faded again, weaving in and out of perception like a warning bell that never fully rang, and in that uncertain space, the rangers stayed where they were, watching, waiting, letting patience become their first act of rescue as the young sun climbed higher, casting thin gold lines across the cub's quiet form and the wide listening plain. The stillness did not hold for long, because on the far edge of the grassland, where shadows still lingered in narrow bands between stems and low shrubs, something began to move with deliberate caution, parting the tall blades inch by inch, its mottled shape blending so completely with dust and dry vegetation that it seemed less like an approaching body and more like a disturbance in the air itself. The hyena emerged without sound, head low, shoulders rolling softly as it advanced, its ears angled forward, its nose lifting and lowering as it tested the scent drifting across the ground. It had followed the quiet, the absence of movement, the faint irregular rhythm of breathing that marked weakness in a landscape where strength was usually loud and unmistakable. Every few steps it paused, weight balanced, ready to retreat or surge forward depending on what revealed itself next. The cub sensed the presence before it fully appeared. Its body gave a slight shudder, a subtle tightening that traveled from its shoulders to its hind legs, and one paw scraped weakly against the earth as if searching for traction that no longer existed. Its head lifted no more than a few centimeters before sinking back down, the effort draining what little energy remained. A thin sound escaped its throat, not a call, not a cry, but a breath that failed to become either. Its eyes opened wider now, dark and glassy, following the slow movement ahead, registering danger without the ability to respond to it. The hyena stopped at the edge of open ground. Its jaws parted slightly, tongue visible, breath steady and unhurried. It studied the small shape before it, noting the lack of resistance, the way the cub did not rise, did not bare its teeth, did not retreat. One forepaw lifted and hovered briefly before settling again, testing distance, testing resolve. Around them, the grass shifted in faint waves, stirred by a light wind that carried scents and sounds in broken fragments. Somewhere beyond the ridge, birds lifted suddenly and resettled, their brief alarm fading into routine. Farther back, where the land dipped gently toward a cluster of thorn trees, a lioness stood half concealed by shadow and foliage. She had not moved for several minutes, her body aligned with the slope, her weight distributed evenly across all four limbs as though carved into place. Only her tail betrayed her tension, drawing slow, rigid arcs through the dust. Her gaze never left the scene unfolding below. Every muscle along her shoulders and spine tightened in subtle waves, instinct urging her forward even as caution held her still. Distance, fatigue, and uncertainty formed invisible barriers she could not immediately cross. The hyena advanced another step. The cub tried once more to shift its position, pushing weakly with its hind legs, managing only to turn its body slightly, exposing its flank. One ranger, watching through binoculars from a distant ridge, whispered almost involuntarily, "Hold on," the words dissolving into the open air. The lioness lowered her head now, her ears flattening, breath deepening as fear and resolve collided within her still form. Above them, the sun climbed higher, brightening every blade of grass, illuminating the fragile space between predator, prey, and protector, where everything depended on what would happen next. The distance between stillness and action closed almost imperceptibly, marked first by a subtle shift in the lioness's weight, then by the quiet release of breath through her nostrils as she began to move, her steps slow and measured, each paw placed with deliberate care so that no sound betrayed her approach, her body lowering slightly as she crossed the open stretch of grass, sunlight catching along the curve of her back and shoulders, revealing the tension held there like coiled wire. The hyena noticed her only when she was already close enough for her presence to alter the air itself, her scent drifting forward in a steady, unmistakable line, and it paused, head lifting, ears swiveling, posture adjusting from casual advance to guarded attention. The cub, sensing the familiar rhythm of its mother's movement, shifted weakly again, managing to raise its head just enough for its eyes to follow her, its breathing quickening in shallow, uneven patterns. Without hesitation, the lioness placed herself between her cub and the approaching predator, her body forming a living barrier, broad and immovable, her tail held low and stiff, her muscles visibly tightening beneath her fur. She did not roar. There was no sudden display, no explosive warning meant to scatter and intimidate. Instead, a low sound vibrated from deep within her chest, steady and restrained, more felt than heard, a continuous thread of warning that carried weight because of what it promised rather than what it revealed. The sound traveled across the short distance between them and settled around the hyena like an invisible boundary. The hyena halted completely now. Its head tilted slightly, one ear angling forward, the other rotating back, gathering information from every direction. Its jaws closed. Its stance widened just enough to allow for quick retreat if needed. It understood the language of this moment, the difference between vulnerability and defended ground, between opportunity and consequence. It shifted its weight once, testing the lioness's resolve, then froze again, eyes fixed on her unblinking stare. Behind the barrier of her body, the cub remained pressed to the earth, its breathing still shallow but steadier now, its small chest rising and falling in fragile rhythm. One of its paws brushed faintly against its mother's hind leg, a minimal contact that nevertheless seemed to anchor it, and she responded with a barely perceptible lean backward, maintaining contact without breaking her stance. From a distant ridge, the rangers watched in silence, binoculars held steady, their movements reduced to the smallest necessary adjustments. One of them whispered, almost without sound, "Good girl," not as praise, but as recognition of what was unfolding before them. No one moved to intervene. Experience had taught them that moments like this were shaped by patience, by restraint, by allowing instinct and bond to speak in their own language. The wind threaded gently through the grass, carrying dust and pollen and distant calls, while the sun continued its slow ascent, illuminating the narrow space where devotion stood firm against hunger. After several long seconds, the hyena took a step backward, then another, its retreat unhurried but unmistakable, dissolving gradually into the tall grass from which it had emerged. The lioness did not pursue. She remained where she was, guarding, breathing, listening, her body still forming a shelter of flesh and resolve around her fragile cub as the savanna resumed its quiet, watchful rhythm. The space left behind by the retreating hyena did not immediately feel empty. It lingered like a held breath, filled with invisible threads of uncertainty and vigilance, as though the land itself had not yet decided whether danger had truly passed. The lioness remained motionless, her body still aligned toward the tall grass, her eyes fixed on the place where the mottled shape had disappeared. Only the slow expansion and release of her ribcage revealed that time was continuing to move forward. Dust settled gradually around her paws, disturbed moments earlier by tension and shifting weight, now returning to the ground in soft, almost imperceptible layers. Behind her, the cub lay quietly for several seconds more, its small form pressed into the earth, its breathing uneven but persistent. Then, in a movement so slight it might have been missed by anyone not watching closely, its neck tightened, muscles gathering in fragile coordination. Its head lifted a fraction, wavered, dipped, and then rose again higher, this time trembling under the effort. The motion was unsteady, imperfect, driven not by confidence but by instinct and necessity. Its eyes blinked slowly, adjusting to the light, following the line of its mother's back as if tracing a familiar shape for reassurance. The lioness sensed the change before she saw it. A subtle shift passed through her posture, her shoulders lowering just enough to soften her silhouette, her tail relaxing into a slower, looser rhythm. She did not turn around. She did not break her protective line. Instead, she held her ground while allowing space for the small movement behind her to continue. The low vibration in her chest faded into silence, replaced by steady, controlled breathing that carried calm rather than warning. At the edge of the grass, the hyena paused once more. Its head emerged briefly between swaying stems, eyes reflecting light as it reassessed the scene. What it saw now was different. The cub, though weak, was no longer entirely still. Its head remained raised, its gaze alert, its presence subtly altered by that simple act of resistance. The lioness had not shifted, had not yielded, had not displayed uncertainty. Together, they formed an image of resolve that unsettled the balance the hyena had been weighing. After a few seconds, it withdrew fully, melting back into the layered textures of grass and shadow. A hush settled across the savanna. Insects resumed their quiet clicking. A distant bird released a low call and fell silent again. Warm air drifted slowly over the open ground, carrying the scent of dust and dry leaves. The cub held its head up for several breaths longer, each rise and fall of its chest visible now, small but determined. Its ears twitched faintly, responding to distant sounds, grounding itself once more in the living world around it. From afar, one ranger lowered his binoculars slightly and murmured, "That's it," more to himself than to anyone else. No one moved closer. No one spoke again. They understood that this pause, fragile and incomplete, belonged to the animals alone. The lioness finally glanced back, just enough for one eye to meet her cub's. For a moment, they remained connected by that quiet line of recognition. Then she turned forward again, standing steady beneath the widening sky, while dust drifted lazily through sunlight and the land held its breath a little longer, cradling a small, stubborn spark of life. The pause did not break suddenly. It loosened, gently, like mist lifting from the ground as warmth continued to gather in the air. The lioness remained still for several more breaths, her body listening in every direction, testing the silence for hidden movement, for any sign that danger might return. When none came, she shifted her weight slowly, first onto one foreleg, then the other, careful not to disturb the fragile balance she had created. Her head lowered slightly and she glanced back again, this time more fully, her gaze settling on the small lifted face behind her. The cub responded with a faint movement of its muzzle and a soft, uneven breath. Its head wavered, then steadied as though gathering courage from her presence. The lioness took one step forward, then paused. She waited. When the cub did not follow, she returned halfway, brushing her flank gently against its side, offering contact rather than command. The touch was light, deliberate, grounding. After a moment, the cub shifted its forepaws, scraping weakly at the soil, and managed to pull its body a short distance forward. They moved like this, slowly and imperfectly, progress measured in small efforts and quiet adjustments. The lioness walked only a few steps at a time, stopping often to look back, to lower her head, to breathe reassurance into the space between them. The cub followed in fragments, sometimes slipping, sometimes resting, sometimes lifting itself only to sink again before trying once more. Each attempt was met with patience. There was no urgency now, only persistence. Far behind them, the tall grass swayed gently, erasing the last traces of the hyena's passage. Whatever hunger had drawn it forward had dissolved into distance and shadow. The savanna, sensing no immediate threat, resumed its layered rhythms. Insects moved through stems. Birds shifted along branches. Distant herds continued their slow migrations across open plains. Life flowed back into familiar channels, quiet and unremarkable to anyone not watching closely. The cub's breathing grew steadier as it moved. Its head remained low, but it no longer dragged. Its ears lifted slightly, responding to sound and motion, reconnecting with the living world around it. Dust clung to its fur, marking each small victory with pale streaks and smudges. The lioness walked beside it now rather than ahead, her body forming a moving shelter, her presence a constant line of safety. From their distant vantage point, the rangers did not follow. They remained where they were, still and silent, binoculars lowered at last. One of them exhaled slowly and whispered, "They'll be all right," though no one answered. They understood that their role had ended before it had truly begun. What mattered had unfolded without their hands. As the pair moved toward a shallow rise where grass thickened and shade gathered, the sun began its gradual descent toward afternoon. Light softened. Colors deepened. Long shadows stretched across the land. The lioness and her cub disappeared gradually into taller growth, their forms breaking apart into moving fragments of gold and brown. In the distance, wind passed through grass like a low, steady breath. Somewhere beyond sight, a herd shifted, hooves brushing earth in muted rhythm. And on the open plain, where danger had once gathered, only dust remained, drifting quietly beneath a wide, patient sky.